So for this deep dive, we're starting with a headline that, I mean, it just has so many layers of complexity. It really demands immediate attention. We're talking about the recent arrests in Castellón, Spain.
Right, of 3 members of that globally prescribed neo-Nazi group, the Base.
And this is so much more than just, a typical arrest.
Oh, absolutely. It's an alarming moment because what they found really reveals how American-born hyper-violent extremism has been successfully exported.
Exported and organized.
Exactly, organized into these heavily armed cells in Europe. So our mission today is to go way beyond the arrests themselves. We really need to unpack this group's U.S. origins, its frankly terrifying ideology, and its global reach.
And critically, the geopolitical questions around its leader, Rinaldo Nazzaro, and his alleged ties to Russia.
That's the big one.
And the defiance from Nazzaro, he's the American leader, believed to be living pretty comfortably in St. Petersburg. It was immediate and chilling.
What do you say?
He messaged a reporter, called the arrests political persecution, and then just escalated the threat. He said, "World governments are," and I'm quoting, "further justifying our resistance to its hegemonic rule by any means necessary."
By any means necessary.
That's not just talk.
Yeah.
That's a clear signal of intent.
And that defiant stance is really the key to understanding the material we've reviewed. The sources all underline just how sophisticated the Spanish cell was.
Right.
These weren't just, teenagers chatting online. They were modeling themselves on an armed insurgency.
Against the state.
Against the state. They took this American brand of what's called accelerationist extremism,
Which we'll get into.
well, but it basically glorifies collapsing society through violence. And they applied it in Europe, taking directions from a leader who's operating out of Russia.
Okay, so let's unpack that specific cell first. Segment 1, the anatomy of a European cell. The arrests were in Castellón, and experts, people who monitor these groups, were genuinely shocked at the level of organization and the arsenal.
That phrase, shocked at the level of organization, really jumps out from the reporting.
It does. Walk us through what law enforcement actually found.
So Europol's press release confirmed they seized a really significant weapons cache. This wasn't a couple of hunting rifles.
Nice.
They confiscated multiple firearms, a machine pistol.
A machine pistol?
Yeah, an automatic weapon, combat knives, a huge supply of ammunition, and even envelopes of cash.
So this was a ready-to-act cell.
Absolutely. This was not a casual militia.
And their philosophy was, literally on display. It wasn't just the weapons. They had all this neo-Nazi paraphernalia. But the really surprising thing, the thing that tells you everything, were the shirts. Shirts featuring the faces of both Adolf Hitler and Ted Kaczynski. Hitler, okay, we can understand that in this context. But why Kaczynski? The Unabomber.
And that's where the ideology of the base becomes, darkly fascinating. And we really need to unpack the jargon here. The base is an accelerationist group. Accelerationism is this belief that the current political system, modern society, basically, is doomed. But it's not collapsing fast enough.
So they want to speed it up, give it a push.
Exactly. They believe they have to use these dramatic, hyper-violent acts to accelerate that societal collapse.
So Kaczynski fits into that.
Perfectly. His manifesto wasn't just anti-government, it was profoundly anti-technology, anti-modernity. It called for dismantling the entire industrialized system.
Right.
So the base idolizes him because his writings are sort of a blueprint for attacking infrastructure, for attacking the establishment, the very things they want to destroy to build their white ethno-state from the ruins.
Wow. That connection alone gives you a chilling insight into their mindset. And the cell, they weren't entirely hiding in the shadows, were they? They had a pretty active digital footprint.
They did, which is highly unusual for a group this organized. They ran their own public Telegram channel. Public. They were openly sharing photos of weapons training, urging militant action. It was recruitment and propaganda. One message they reposted just distills their violent grievance perfectly. It said, "Your liberties aren't dying, they're being killed by people with names and addresses."
So they're telling their followers exactly who to target.
Precisely.
And that digital footprint, I imagine it makes it easier for law enforcement to confirm the structure of the organization.
It does, because the source material confirms the leader of the Spanish cell was allegedly in direct, continuous contact with Rinaldo Nazzaro himself.
Which is critical.
Absolutely critical. It shows Nazzaro isn't just some figurehead with a website in Russia. He's actively directing operations inside sovereign European nations.
Just turns it from just, independent radicalization into a coordinated international terrorism export.
That's a perfect way to put it.
Which brings us to the bigger picture, segment 2, ideology, aspiration, and global acts. So if their goal is acceleration, what are they accelerating toward? And how global has their violence actually become?
Well, the base has been remarkably consistent about its goals. They glorify what they call calculated ruthlessness against their enemies.
And for them, enemies are
Racial minorities, Jewish people, leftists, critical infrastructure. And they pair this nihilistic view with intense paramilitary training, survivalism, tactical drills.
But what's the end game for them? Beyond just, burning it all down.
The end game is the ethno-state. They openly state their desire to, quote, acquire mountain land to form protected, self-sufficient, and self-managed white communities.
And there's a specific detail here, right, about Ukraine.
Yes. The Spanish cell openly endorsed the base's efforts to start one of these communities in the Zakarpattia region of Ukraine.
And that's where the ideology crashes right into the reality of the ongoing war.
It does. It ties them even more tightly to the whole geopolitical conflict. And you have to understand, this isn't just theoretical. We have concrete, recent examples that prove the base's capacity for severe violence.
Like what?
The group recently claimed the assassination of a Ukrainian officer in Kyiv. That was back in July. They claimed it.
They claimed it. And we also saw a Swedish member of the base imprisoned in Luxembourg just last week. He was plotting a mass-casualty event.
At Eurovision, of all places.
At a past Eurovision singing competition. An incredibly high-profile target designed to maximize chaos.
It's all about pushing society closer to that collapse.
Exactly. Their own communications reflect this. A post from the Spanish cell back in April said, "We live for combat. We sacrifice ourselves for victory." They are completely dedicated to this.
And that level of global activity, it naturally draws all the scrutiny back to their leader, who is sitting in, well, one of the most strategically significant places on the planet. Which brings us to segment 3, the Russian connection and Nazzaro's past.
And this is where the story gets really bizarre. It almost borders on fiction.
You have Rinaldo Nazzaro. He's an American citizen from New Jersey.
Right.
Currently living in St. Petersburg with his Russian wife and kids, running a globally organized neo-Nazi group.
The paradox, it just speaks for itself. But it gets even deeper when you look at his U.S. professional background.
This is the really shocking part. We're talking about an individual who was trained by the U.S. government to analyze and counter terrorism.
So he worked for the Department of Homeland Security, DHS.
He did. And he also collaborated with American Special Forces as an analyst, specifically targeting jihadist terrorists in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Wait, so what are the implications of that? That the U.S. intelligence community basically trained a future global terrorist leader.
The implication is terrifying. He understands how intelligence agencies track people, how they recruit. He knows counter-surveillance.
He knows their playbook.
And those skills he got while targeting groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS, are now being used to train and direct Western extremists against Western interests. It makes him uniquely dangerous.
And of course, Nazzaro denies any connection to Russian security services. He even went on a Kremlin-controlled TV channel to say he has no contact.
He does. But the sources suggest the concern among intelligence agencies is incredibly high. It's described as incredibly concerning.
And the allegation, it moved beyond just suspicion, right? It wasn't just about him living in Russia anymore.
No, it moved to potential collaboration. And that shift happened when the base started offering financial bounties over the summer.
Bounties for what?
For the assassination of Ukrainian military and political figures. When you start weaponizing your followers with money and instructions to kill enemy state officials, well, many analysts see that as direct collaboration with the Kremlin's objectives.
If we connect that to the bigger geopolitical picture, it seems like the base is being slotted into a larger strategy.
It fits perfectly into the model of hybrid warfare. We're seeing Kremlin operatives increasingly paying either unknowing criminals or far-right activists across Europe to carry out these low-level sabotage missions.
Against countries supporting Ukraine.
Exactly.
So targeting infrastructure.
Yeah.
Utility grids, supply routes.
Precisely. And groups like the base, with their existing paramilitary training and extremist motivation, they are prime, expendable targets for recruitment into those kinds of operations.
And the fact that the Spanish cell was caught with cash and a machine pistol.
It suggests they were highly functional and potentially ready for deployment in exactly that kind of sabotage effort.
So we have an American extremist ideology exported, trained by a former U.S. analyst, and potentially weaponized by a hostile state.
A very dangerous mix.
But the sources confirm that this group is still a major domestic threat right here in its founding country. Which brings us to segment 4, the U.S. footprint and shifting scrutiny.
Right. While Nazzaro focuses on global expansion, the base is still believed to be most active here in the United States. And historically, it was the subject of an incredibly relentless FBI counterterrorism investigation that started around 2019.
And that investigation was successful, right? It led to more than a dozen arrests.
It did, including 3 members who planned a mass shooting and bombing in Virginia back in 2020. So, the resources and the focus were clearly there to tackle this threat before.
Which raises a very important and highly sensitive question about current U.S. efforts.
It does, and we need to be very direct and impartial in conveying what the source material indicates here.
So, according to the sources, there are serious allegations that the FBI, that it has pulled resources from pursuing cases against right-wing extremists of all stripes.
Allegedly at the behest of the White House and under its director.
And that would include groups like the base.
Yes. The material tells us that the FBI is reportedly prioritizing investigations targeting the political enemies of the current administration.
And the sources specifically name anti-fascist activists.
They do, and also contributing significant resources to large-scale nationwide IC raids. So it's an alleged redirection of focus.
And that's extraordinarily consequential. If resources are pulled, monitoring goes down.
And threats can regenerate.
It's a classic catch-22. A group that was successfully prosecuted for planning mass casualty events is now potentially benefiting from a shift in priorities.
And what's fascinating is that even with this alleged shift, the experts who study these groups are sounding the alarm loudly. Stephen Rye, an analyst who studies the base, he issued a very direct warning after the Spanish arrests. He said, and I'm quoting, "These behaviors echo the group's earlier era between 2019 and 2020 when various members planned serious acts of violence before being arrested."
So the blueprint for domestic attacks is still valid, whether the FBI is watching as closely or not.
Exactly.
That is a stark warning and a vital point for you to consider as we try to synthesize all this. The base is not a simple problem.
Not at all. It's a persistent, globally exported threat that blends advanced paramilitary training with this truly nihilistic accelerationist ideology.
And it's operating in the shadow of major geopolitical conflicts.
Taking direction from a U.S.-born leader in Russia and potentially being used and aided by a state actor for sabotage.
The complexity is just immense. It bridges domestic terrorism, international extremism, and state-level intelligence. And we should applaud law enforcement like Europol and the Spanish police for catching these cells. That is a major victory.
It is a victory, but the final warning from the source material is still critically relevant here.
Which is?
While law enforcement can catch the physical cells, the real persistent challenge is disrupting the digital recruitment, the ideological export. It's not just about the 3 guys with a machine pistol in Castellón.
It's the constant, relentless flow of the information, the training manuals, the philosophy.
Exactly. It's what the source calls the persistent online ecosystem, which has crystallized around it. It provides a blueprint for hyper-violent extremism that originated right here in the United States.
And is now inspiring and directing terror worldwide.
And until that digital environment is somehow effectively disrupted, the core ideology will just continue to find new recruits ready to accelerate the collapse, whether they're in New Jersey or